The dying bomber appeared over Port Moresby at 3 in the afternoon, trailing smoke like a funeral shroud. It came in low, too low. The engines coughed and sputtered, their rhythm broken, their song wrong. From the ground, mechanics stopped their work and looked up. They had seen damaged planes before. This was different. This was a corpse still trying to fly. The B-17 lurched across the sky, its wings shredding air instead of cutting through it. Pieces of metal fell away like scales from a dying fish. The nose was gone, just gone. Where there should have been glass and a bombardier's station, there was only jagged aluminum and the hollow wind. As it passed overhead, men counted holes. They stopped at 50, then at 100. The plane was more absence than presence, more void than metal. It should not be in the air. It should be scattered across the Solomon Sea in 1,000 burning pieces. But it was flying, barely, desperately, with the kind of stubborn refusal to die that separates machines from men and men from myths. The landing gear dropped. One wheel, then another. The third hung crooked like a broken leg. The plane lined up with the runway, too fast, too steep. Fire trucks raced to meet it. Ambulances followed. A priest began to pray. The wheels touched earth. The bomber bounced. Metal screamed. Tires exploded. It bounced again, lower, then raced across tarmac at killing speed, no brakes. The hydraulics were gone. Only momentum and prayer remained. It plowed into dirt beyond the runway, carving a furrow through red earth. The propellers bit soil. The fuselage groaned. It slid and slid. 15 feet from the tree line, it stopped. Silence fell. Men crawled from the waste door. They touched ground, kissed it. One vomited, another laughed, then cried, then laughed again. Medics reached the cockpit through the shattered nose. They found the pilot slumped over controls, flight suit dark with blood. His hands still gripped the yoke, eyes closed. For a moment they thought him dead, then his chest rose, once, twice, a shallow, ragged breath. "He's alive," someone said, and the words sounded like a question. They pulled him out carefully. His left leg was destroyed, bone shattered by a bullet through the cockpit floor, his wrist wrapped in a tourniquet made from torn jacket, face grey as ash. Behind him, strapped in the bombardier's seat, they found Isaac Dalton, breathing, barely, stomach torn by shrapnel. The medics worked fast, but their eyes said what mouths wouldn't. Minutes, maybe less. As they carried Thorne toward the ambulance, he opened his eyes, looked back at the smoking wreck. "Did we get the photos?" he whispered. The medic didn't know. Said yes anyway. Thorne closed his eyes and let darkness take him. 4 days earlier, May 18, 1943, Port Moresby, New Guinea, heat sat on the airfield with physical weight, not just hot. Heat was temperature, a number. This was oppressive, the kind that made men stupid and machines brittle. It turned aluminum to griddles and patience to violence, rose from tarmac in waves, distorting air, making jungle shimmer like mirage. Garrett Thorne stood at the flight line's edge, watching planes that weren't his take off for missions he wasn't allowed to fly. 34. Old for a pilot. The kids flying heavy iron were 22, 23, fresh from training with smooth faces and clean records. Thorne's face was lined. His record was not clean. He had the look of a man who'd seen too much and slept too little. True on both counts. He hadn't slept in 3 days. Couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the same thing. A cockpit, Zero's guns flashing. A man dying because Thorne had been asleep when he should have been awake. So he didn't sleep. Walked the flight line instead, checking engines he wasn't allowed to start, inspecting planes he wasn't allowed to fly. Behind him, the operations tent buzzed. Pilots received briefings, crews loaded bombs. The war continued without him. "Thorn!" The voice was sharp, clipped, military. Colonel Harlan Voss stood in shadow, uniform crisp despite heat. 48, career army, the kind who believed rules existed for reason and men who broke them were dangerous. He looked at Thorn the way a mechanic looks at a part that keeps failing. "My office. Now." Thorn followed. The tent was cooler, barely. A fan turned lazily, moving hot air from one side to the other. Voss sat behind a desk made from ammunition crates and plywood, didn't offer Thorn a seat. "I've received 3 complaints about you this week." Voss tapped a folder. "You were seen inspecting aircraft at 0300. You questioned a crew chief about fuel mixtures. You submitted an unsolicited report on formation tactics." Thorn said nothing. "You are not assigned to a crew, not assigned to a plane. You're here on administrative status because no squadron commander will have you. Do you understand why? They think I'm reckless." "You are reckless." Voss leaned forward. 6 weeks ago, you broke formation to pursue a zero, engaged without orders, put 8 aircraft at risk to chase 1 enemy fighter. I shot down 3. And could have gotten everyone killed. Ice in the voice. "This is not a private war, Thorn. We fight as a unit. Follow orders. Trust the man beside us. Right now, no one trusts you." Words hung in air. "I can fly," Thorn said quietly. "Flying isn't enough. This is about discipline, fitting into a team." Voss pulled a folder from his desk. Inside, a single sheet. Official letterhead. He reached for a stamp. Red ink, pressed it hard against the paper, hard. The word "grounded" appeared across the top. "Effective immediately, you are barred from all combat flight operations." Voss slid the paper across. "No missions, no training flights, no aircraft under your command. This is an official order, Captain. You are grounded until further notice." Thorn stared at the red stamp. It looked like blood. "How long?" "Until I decide, if I ever decide, you can be trusted." Voss stood. "Your work ground duties, supply inventory, logistics, dismissed." Thorn took the paper, walked out into crushing heat. The sun was a white hole. Around him, war continued. Planes took off, men fought, and Garrett Thorn was grounded. He walked until he reached the airfield's edge, where jungle pressed close, kept walking, past active flight line, past maintenance hangars, past places where living planes lived, walked until he reached the boneyard. The boneyard was where machines went to die, half a mile along southern perimeter. A graveyard of broken B-17s and shattered dreams. Some had lost wings, others had fuselages like Swiss cheese, riddled with holes from Japanese cannons. They sat in mud and weeds, slowly being stripped for parts to keep other planes alive. No one came unless they had to. Bad luck. Depressing. A reminder that aluminum and courage weren't enough. Thorn came every night. He moved between wrecks, a ghost among ghosts, flashlight beam picking out details, cracked cowlings, shredded tires, bloodstains on pilot seats rain hadn't washed away. He wasn't sure why he came. Maybe these planes understood failure. Maybe here, among the dead, he didn't feel alone. Tonight his light fell on something new. A B-17 sat apart from others, not quite stripped, not quite abandoned. Serial number on the tail, 41-2666. The last 3 digits caught his eye, 666. Number of the beast, bad luck. He could see why it sat alone. Thorn approached slowly, boots squelching in mud. The plane looked intact at first glance. Closer, he saw problems. Tail section sat too low, like rear gear was collapsing. Nose pointed up at an unnatural angle. The whole aircraft had the posture of a drunk trying to stand. He climbed inside through the waste door. Interior, smelled of mildew and hydraulic fluid. Flashlights swept empty bomb bay, radio compartment, navigator station. Everything there, everything worked, but something was wrong. He made his way to the cockpit, settled into pilot's seat. Yoke felt good in hands, right, like coming home. He checked trim settings, fuel selectors, instrument panel. Then he understood. Center of gravity too far back, tail too heavy. Someone had installed equipment wrong or loaded weight incorrectly, or made a dozen small mistakes adding up to one big problem. The plane wanted to fly nose up, would be sluggish, unresponsive. In combat, a death trap. But it could be fixed. Thorne sat in dark cockpit for a long time. No one wanted this plane. No one would miss it. If he could fix it, make it fly right, he'd have his own aircraft. A bomber belonging to no squadron, answering to no colonel, a plane that would let him fly. He could volunteer for missions no one else wanted, long-range reconnaissance, solo photo flights, desperate, dangerous work beneath formation commander's notice, but essential to war. He could fly, and flying was all that mattered. Planning to steal it? Thorne's hand went to sidearm before he recognized the voice. He turned. A figure stood in the waist doorway, silhouetted against stars. "Relax, Captain, just me." The man stepped into flashlight beam, younger, maybe 29, dark hair and eyes holding too much intelligence for his rank, uniform wrinkled, boots muddy, fresh purple bruise on his jaw. Isaac Dalton, bombardier, troublemaker, currently awaiting disciplinary action for striking a superior officer. "What are you doing here?" Thorne asked. "Same as you, hiding from people who don't want us." Dalton looked around cockpit, ran a hand along the instrument panel. 666, the cursed plane, heard 2 pilots died trying to fly it. They didn't understand weight distribution. "And you do?" Thorne nodded. "It's fixable. A week's work, maybe 2. Move equipment, rebalance load, reinforce tail structure." Dalton was quiet. Then, "I heard Voss grounded you." "Effective immediately." "And you think fixing this wreck will change his mind?" "No." Thorne looked at Dalton directly. "I think if I have my own plane, I don't need his permission." A smile touched Dalton's lips. "That's either very smart or very stupid." Probably both." Dalton sat in bombardier's position, looked out through nose glass at dark boneyard beyond. "I heard you're good, really good. Shot down 3 Zeros in one pass, and nearly got my squadron killed. Maybe, or maybe you saw opportunity and took it while everyone else was too scared to break formation." Dalton turned. "I'm good too. Best bombardier in the Pacific, or so I keep telling people, but no one wants to fly with me because I don't follow orders well." "Why not?" "Because most orders are stupid," Dalton shrugged. "Got in a fight with a major who wanted me to bomb a target I couldn't see through cloud cover. He said bomb anyway. I said no. He made it an order. I made it a fist fight." Despite everything, Thorne almost smiled. "If you're serious about fixing this plane," Dalton said, "you'll need a crew. Bomber doesn't fly with one man." "I'll find people." "You'll find people no one else wants. Screw-ups, misfits. One's rejected too many times to care about playing safe." Dalton stood, extended hand. "Count me in." Thorne looked at the offered hand, then took it. "One condition," Thorne said. "I'm pilot, I give orders. If you can't follow them, we're done." "Fair. One condition on my end, orders have to make sense. I won't follow stupid into the ground just because it wears captain's bars." Not exactly military protocol, but nothing about this was. They shook. They found the rest of the crew the way you find anything valuable in wartime, by looking where everyone else avoided. Elijah Kincaid was praying in the chapel tent, tall man with careful eyes and calloused hands from work before war. Others called him preacher, accurate. He'd been a minister in Georgia before Pearl Harbor, now a tail gunner with a problem. No crew wanted him. "Why not?" Thorne asked. Kincaid didn't answer immediately, looked at Thorne, deciding how much truth to tell. Finally, "I don't fit their idea of what a gunner should be. They think I'll hesitate. That faith makes you weak." "Does it?" "Faith makes you see clearly. What I see clearly is that killing is sometimes necessary." Voice quiet, certain. "God put me here for a reason. I can shoot straighter than any man in this squadron, but they don't want to find out." Thorne hired him immediately. Silas Brennan they found in Stockade serving 3 days for gambling debts. Waste gunner who'd lost 2 months' pay in poker, couldn't make restitution. MPs holding him until next paycheck cleared. "I'm good with a gun," Brennan said through bars. "Just bad with money." "Can you follow orders?" "Depends on the orders." Close enough. Thorne paid his debt. Brennan joined. Nathaniel Cross was a navigator rejected by 4 crews for being too methodical, too slow, too careful. In war valuing quick decisions, Cross was a man who triple-checked calculations. "I don't make mistakes," Cross told Thorne, "but I don't make them because I take time." "How much time?" "As much as it takes to be right." Thorne thought about flying he'd do. Long-range missions, solo runs, navigation mattered more than speed. Hired. Owen Merrick was last. Radio operator who barely spoke, kept his head down, opinions to himself, passed over for assignment simply because no one remembered he existed. But when Thorne asked around, he learned Merrick could fix a radio with paperclip and spit, and his Morse code was faster than anyone. "Why do you want to fly?" Thorne asked. Merrick looked at him with flat, unreadable eyes. "Same reason as you. Sitting still feels like dying." Not poetry, but honest. The crew was assembled. 5 men who didn't fit. 5 men no one else wanted. Under other circumstances, a liability, but circumstances weren't normal. And Garrett Thorne wasn't looking for normal. He was looking for men desperate enough to fly a cursed plane into hell. He'd found them. For 10 days they worked. The boneyard became their world. Arrived before dawn, left after dark, working by flashlight when sun went down. They stripped parts from other wrecks, gun mounts, ammunition feeds, armor plating, anything to make 666 less death trap, more weapon. Biggest change was Thorne's idea. Insane. B-17S had defensive guns. 10 of them, scattered around fuselage to cover angles. But the nose was weak. Standard armament. Single .30 caliber machine gun on flexible mount. Meant to scare fighters, not kill them. Japanese pilots knew this, learned to attack head-on, flying straight at the nose where bombers' firepower was weakest. Rake cockpit with cannon fire, kill pilots, break away before heavier guns could track. Thorne's solution was radical. He bolted a fixed 50 caliber machine gun to cockpit floor, pointing straight through nose glass. Rigged trigger to control yoke. Pilot could aim entire bomber-like fighter plane and shoot. Never been done. There were reasons. Recoil would shake cockpit. Weight would affect center of gravity. Manual explicitly forbade modifications to pilot station. Dalton loved it. "You're turning a 30-ton bomber into the world's heaviest fighter," he said, grinning. "Either genius or suicide." Maybe both. They installed more guns in waist, doubling firepower, cut holes in floor, mounted downward-firing guns covering belly. By the time they were done, the plane had 19 machine guns instead of standard 10. It looked like a porcupine, all spikes and angles and bad temper. 19 guns meant 19 times ammunition, more weight. Plane would be slower, heavier, harder to fly, but also meant anything attacking would walk into a wall of lead. On the 11th day, they were ready to test. Thorne climbed into pilot's seat at dawn. Crew took positions. He ran checklist, hands moving with muscle memory, fuel mixture, throttle, magnetos. Engines coughed, caught. One by one, roared to life. The sound was beautiful. He taxied to far runway end, away from main flight line. No clearance, no permission, if Voss found out, court-martial. Thorne pushed throttles forward. Bomber was heavy, reluctant, picked up speed slowly, eating runway like a fat man climbing stairs. End of tarmac rushed closer. Dalton said something over intercom. Thorne didn't catch. Then wheels left ground. They were flying. Plane climbed slowly, grudgingly, but it climbed. Thorne felt controls respond, felt modification wait, felt how Bomber wanted to wallow in turns. But it flew true. He brought it around in wide circle, testing handling, getting feel for machine. Not graceful, never fast, but solid, stable, with 19 guns, didn't need graceful. They landed 20 minutes later. As Thorne shut down engines, he saw a jeep racing across field toward them. Colonel Voss climbed out before vehicle stopped, face the color of a bruise. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Thorne climbed down from cockpit. Didn't salute. "Testing a plane." "That plane is scrap, not assigned. You don't have authorization." "It flies." Voss looked at Bomber, at extra guns bristling from every surface, at serial number 666 painted on tail. His jaw worked. For a moment, Thorne thought he might explode. Then a different voice cut through tension. "Colonel Voss, a word." General Curtis Ashford walked across tarmac with unhurried pace of a man outranking everyone present. 55, grey-haired, weathered face from making impossible decisions every day for 3 years. Voss saluted. Thorne followed. Ashford looked at Bomber for a long moment, then at Thorne. "You're the pilot who shot down 3 Zeros last month?" "Yes, sir." "Also the pilot who broke formation and nearly got his squadron killed?" "Yes, sir." Ashford was quiet. Then, "Colonel, I need to borrow Captain Thorne, his crew, this plane." Voss's expression went from anger to confusion. "Sir?" "We have a mission, bad one. Asked 5 pilots to volunteer. All 5 refused. Requires single bomber to fly over Bougainville and take reconnaissance photographs for 20 minutes, alone. No fighter escort, broad daylight." Words hung in air. "That's suicide," Voss said flatly. "Yes, which is why no one will do it." Ashford looked at Thorne. "But you'll do it, won't you, Captain?" Thorne didn't hesitate. "Yes, sir." "Just like that?" "You don't know details." "I know enough. You need photos. You need someone crazy enough to fly into Hornet's Nest alone. You need it done." Thorne nodded toward Bomber. "That's what we built this for." Ashford smiled. Not happy. "Mission is in 4 days, May 22nd. You'll fly to Bougainville, photograph coastline and airfields, return. Intelligence estimates 17 to 20 Zero fighters stationed there. They will come for you, all of them." "Understood. If you succeed, those photographs will save thousands of lives when we invade. If you fail..." Ashford shrugged. "No one will be surprised." Voss stepped forward. "Sir, I must protest. Thorne is grounded for disciplinary..." "Not anymore." Ashford's voice was iron. "Captain Thorne is volunteering for a mission no one else will touch. I'm authorizing it." He pulled the red stamped grounding order from Voss's folder, looked at it, then tore it in half. "1 flight, Captain. If you survive, we'll discuss your status. If you don't..." Another shrug. He turned, walked back to jeep. Voss looked at Thorne. For a moment, something almost like respect flickered, then gone. 4 days, Voss said. Use them well, because after this, one way or another, you're done. He left. Crew gathered around Thorne. No one spoke. Finally, Dalton broke silence. 17 to 20 Zeros, just us, flying straight and level for 20 minutes. He laughed. No humor. "We're going to die." "Probably," Thorne agreed, and good. Dalton clapped his shoulder. I'd hate to waste all this work on something easy." Night before the mission, Thorne couldn't sleep. Normal. He never slept. But tonight was different. Tonight, insomnia felt less like curse, more like preparation. Mind racing through calculations, scenarios, 1,000 ways mission could go wrong. 2 in the morning, he gave up trying to rest. Walked to Boneyard, to the bomber. 2666. Found Dalton already there, sitting in nose, smoking. Couldn't sleep either, Dalton asked. Never can. Want to talk about it? Thorne climbed into cockpit, settled into pilot seat. Long time, didn't answer. Then, 3 years ago I was co-pilot. Escorting bombers to Rabaul. Pilot told me to rest. I did. Slept 20 minutes. When I woke, Zeros had hit us. Pilot was dead. Bled out while I slept. Dalton was quiet. I got us home, Thorne continued. But he died because I closed my eyes. So now I don't. Can't. That wasn't your fault. Doesn't matter, he's still dead. Dalton took long drag. Tomorrow we're flying into worst odds I've ever seen. 1 bomber, 20 fighters, 20 minutes sitting still while they tear us apart. Manual says we should die. Odds say we should die. Common sense says we should die. I know. But we're not going to. Know why? Why? Dalton looked at him. Because you don't sleep. Because you see every angle, every threat, every possibility. Because while everyone else dreams, you're planning. Tomorrow, when those zeros come, you'll be ready. We all will. Thorne wanted to believe that. Wasn't sure he did, but he nodded. Dawn would come in 4 hours, mission in 8. Whatever happened after that, Garrett Thorne would finally be back in the air, where he belonged. May 22nd, 1943, 05:30 hours. Sun came up red over Port Moresby, colour of old blood. Thorne stood on tarmac, watching it rise, hands wrapped around coffee gone cold an hour ago. Hadn't drunk any, stomach was a knot of tension having nothing to do with fear, everything to do with anticipation. Today he would fly. Today, after weeks grounded, weeks being told he was too dangerous, too reckless, too broken to be trusted, he would prove them wrong, or die trying. The bomber sat on hardstand 50 yards away, metal skin slick with morning dew. In early light it looked almost beautiful. Almost. Extra guns broke clean lines of fuselage. Reinforced nose glass was thicker than standard, giving it a blunt, aggressive look. Serial number 41-2666 painted white on tail, numbers stark against olive drab. 666. Cursed plane. The one everyone said would never fly right. Thorne had spent 4 days proving them wrong. Crew arrived one by one, moving through pre-dawn darkness like ghosts. Kincaid came first, Bible under one arm, gunner's jacket over the other, nodded to Thorne but didn't speak. Some moments too heavy for words. Brennan and Merrick arrived together, talking low. Cross came last, carrying navigation charts in leather case, movements precise and methodical even now. And Dalton! Dalton walked across tarmac with loose-limbed confidence of a man who'd accepted his death and found acceptance liberating. Had a cigarette between lips and a smile that didn't quite reach eyes. Beautiful morning to die, he said. We're not dying, Thorne replied. Of course not, just flying a 30-ton bomber into most heavily defended airspace in the Pacific, alone, sitting still for 20 minutes while every zero in Solomon Islands tries to kill us. Piece of cake. Despite everything, Thorne almost smiled. They gathered under wing. Above them, mechanics made final checks, loading film into cameras, topping off fuel tanks, checking ammunition feeds. 19 guns meant 19 belts of ammunition, thousands of rounds. Weight made planes sit low on landing gear, like a sprinter crouched at starting line. General Ashford arrived in jeep, accompanied by 2 intelligence officers carrying sealed folders. climbed out slowly, looking at each man in turn. "Gentlemen," he said, voice quiet but carried in still morning air. "What you're about to do is important, critical. Photographs you bring back will determine where and how we land on Bougainville, will save lives, thousands of them." He paused, let that sink in. "I won't lie, odds are bad. Japanese have radar. They'll see you coming. They have fighters based at 3 airfields on the island. When you start your photo run, they will scramble everything, and you will be alone." No one spoke. "If any man wants to step down, now is the time. No judgment, no consequences." Silence stretched. Somewhere on far side of field, an engine coughed to life. No one moved. Ashford nodded slowly. "Then good luck, and good hunting." He shook each man's hand. When he reached Thorne, he held on a moment longer. "Bring them home, Captain." "Yes, sir." Ashford left. Intelligence officers stayed long enough to verify cameras were loaded, then they too disappeared into growing light. Crew stood together a moment longer. Then Kincaid cleared his throat. "I'd like to say a prayer, if that's acceptable." Thorne nodded. They bowed heads. Above them, sky was turning red to gold. "Lord," Kincaid's voice was steady, certain, "we ask not for safety, but for courage. Not for easy path, but for strength to walk a hard one. Guide our hands, steady our aim. And if this day is our last, let it count for something. Amen." "Amen," they echoed. "Amen." Then there was nothing left but to fly. Takeoff was brutal. With full fuel and maximum ammunition, Bomber was too heavy. Thorne knew it the moment he pushed throttles forward. Engines screamed, pulling against weight, fighting physics and probability. Plane rolled down runway, gaining speed too slowly, eating concrete too quickly. Halfway down strip, still not fast enough to fly. "Come on," Thorne muttered. "Come on, you stubborn bastard." End of runway rushed closer. Beyond it, trees. Beyond them, mountains. Dalton's voice crackled over intercom. "Any time now, Captain." Thorne pulled back on yoke. For terrible second, nothing happened. Plane wanted to stay on ground, wanted to be earthbound and safe, and not flying into hell. Then wheels left concrete. They were airborne. Barely. Bomber clawed for altitude, inch by inch, engines howling, frames shaking, cleared trees at runway end with maybe 10 feet to spare. Thorne heard Brennan exhale over intercom, sound like a man who'd been holding breath for very long time. "Gear up," Thorne ordered. Landing gear retracted with mechanical groan. Slowly, fighting for every foot, they climbed. Port Moresby fell away behind them. Mountains of Owen Stanley Range rose ahead, jagged and green and unforgiving. Had to clear those peaks before they could turn north toward Bougainville. At current rate of climb would take 40 minutes. Thorne settled into rhythm of flight, hands on yoke, eyes on instruments, mind calculating fuel burn, airspeed, rate of climb. This was what he was good at. This was where insomnia became advantage. While other pilots might relax, might let guard down, Thorne's mind never stopped working. Beside him, Dalton worked through his own checklist, verifying cameras, checking bomb site, even though they wouldn't be dropping bombs today. "Can I ask you something?" Dalton said after a while. "Go ahead." "Why do you really do this? Don't give me the line about duty or patriotism. I want truth." Thorne was quiet for a long moment. They were at 8,000 feet now, engines still straining. Below, jungle was unbroken carpet of green. "I told you about pilot who died, the one I was supposed to help." "Yeah." "His name was Robert Chen. We'd been flying together 6 months. He had a wife in California, 2 kids, showed me pictures every day." Thorne's voice was flat, factual. "When he died, I wrote his wife, told her he was hero, told her he saved squadron, told her everything except truth. Which was? That I was asleep, that I failed him. Thorne adjusted trim, correcting for crosswind. Every time I fly now, every mission, every sortie, I'm trying to make up for that. Can't bring him back, can't undo it. But I can make sure I never fail anyone again. Dalton was quiet. Then, you know that's impossible, right? Can't save everyone. Doesn't mean I stop trying. No, Dalton agreed. I suppose it doesn't. They flew on in silence. 2 hours into flight, they crossed Solomon Sea. Ocean below was hammered sheet of blue stretching to every horizon, beautiful and utterly indifferent to small drama playing out above it. If they went down out here, there would be no rescue, water too deep, distances too vast. They would simply disappear, another mystery of Pacific War. Thorne checked his watch. 07:45 hours. Bougainville should be visible soon. Cross, he said into intercom. Give me a heading. Navigator's voice came back crisp and precise. 340 degrees, maintain current altitude. Target should be visual in 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Then real work began. Thorne looked over at Dalton. Bombardier was staring out through nose glass, expression unreadable. You scared? Thorne asked. Terrified. You? Yes. Good. Means we're not stupid. Dalton turned to look at him. When they come, and they will come, what's the plan? I'm going to turn this bomber into a fighter, line them up, shoot them down. Nose gun gives us advantage they won't expect. And if there are too many? Then we shoot faster. Not much of a plan, but all they had. At 0800 hours, Bougainville appeared on horizon. From distance, looked peaceful. Green smudge against blue, volcanic peaks rising from sea, clouds clinging to highlands. But Thorne knew what was hidden in that jungle. Airfields, anti-aircraft batteries, thousands of Japanese soldiers who'd turned island into fortress. And somewhere down there, pilots were already running to their planes. Beginning photo run, Dalton announced, voice steady, professional. Leveling off at 25,000 feet. Captain, I need straight and level flight for 20 minutes. You've got it. Thorne brought bomber around in wide arc, lining up on coastline. Cameras in belly began to click, mechanical rhythms steady and relentless. Each click, another piece of intelligence. Each click might save a life. Each click was a second they sat exposed in sky. Intercom crackled, Kincaid's voice from tail position. Captain, we've got company. Thorne's hands tightened on yoke. How many? Counting now. 5, 8, 12. A pause. Then, contacts at 6 o'clock low. 17 fighters, climbing fast. 70. Number hung in air like death sentence. Dalton swore softly. Somewhere in back, someone was praying. Cameras kept clicking. All positions, Thorne's voice was ice. Check your guns. Safety's off. When they come, make every shot count. Acknowledgements came back one by one. Crew was ready as anyone could be for what was coming. Thorne looked out to cockpit window. Below and behind, he could see them now. Small dots rising from green, climbing in tight formation. Mitsubishi A6M0s. Fast, agile, deadly. 17 of them against one heavy bomber. Odds were impossible, but Garrett Thorne had stopped believing in odds a long time ago. 0 squadron, simultaneous. Major Takeshi Yamada pulled his fighter into climbing turn, squadron following in perfect formation behind him. 32 years old, flying since 20. 23 confirmed kills painted on cockpit side. Knew every trick, every tactic, every weakness of American bombers. And now one had been stupid enough to fly over Bougainville alone. Would be his 24th kill. Easy, almost boring. All aircraft, he said into radio. Standard attack pattern. Lead flight takes nose, second flight tail, third flight wait for opening. Acknowledgements crackled back. His pilots knew what to do. They'd done this dozens of times. Yamada studied bomber as it grew larger in windscreen. Looked like standard B-17, same shape, same size, but something was different. Couldn't quite place what. Then he saw the guns, more guns than normal, much more. Waist positions bristled with weapons, belly had what looked like extra mounts, and the nose... Was that a fixed gun pointing forward? Impossible. B-17S didn't mount fixed guns in nose. Bombardier had flexible weapon, but nothing heavy, nothing that could really hurt a fighter. Yamada shook his head. American desperation. Wouldn't matter. One bomber against 17 fighters was mathematics. Simple arithmetic. Answer was always 0. He signaled to his flight. They spread out, positioning for classic 12 o'clock high attack. Would dive from above and ahead, rake cockpit with cannon fire, kill pilots, watch bomber fall. Yamada pushed stick forward, began dive. American bomber grew larger, could see cockpit now, see pilots inside. He lined up sights. Finger moved to trigger. Then bomber did something unexpected. It turned toward him. Thorne saw lead 0 commit to dive. Japanese pilot had made his choice, was coming straight down pipe, expecting bomber to flinch, to turn away, to give him deflection shot harder to defend against. Instead, Thorne turned into attack, used rudder pedals to skid heavy bomber sideways, bringing nose around. Fixed .50 caliber gun mounted to cockpit floor, swiveled with aircraft. Now it was pointing directly at diving 0. "Come on," Thorne whispered. "Closer." Albeit 0 was at 400 yards. 300, 200. Still too far for light defensive guns, but not too far for heavy .50 caliber firing armor-piercing incendiary rounds. Thorne waited, hands steady on yoke, heart a drum in chest. 0 filled windscreen, propeller a silver blur, wings lit up with muzzle flashes as pilot fired. 20mm cannon rounds hammered into bomber's nose. Glass shattered, metal screamed, round punched through fuselage 6 inches from Thorne's head. He didn't flinch. 100 yards. Thorne squeezed trigger. Nose gun roared. Recoil shook entire cockpit, exactly like engineers said it would. But Thorne had anticipated it, compensated for it. Stream of .50 caliber rounds was accurate, deadly. They walked straight into 0's engine cowling. Japanese fighter shuddered. Smoke poured from engine, then flame. Then engine blocks simply disintegrated, torn apart by rounds designed to punch through armor plate. For one frozen second, Thorne saw pilot's face, saw expression of pure shock. American bomber wasn't supposed to shoot back like this, wasn't supposed to have gun that could kill from head on. But it did. 0 exploded, ball of orange fire and black smoke and tumbling debris. Pieces flew past bomber's nose, close enough to hear shriek of torn metal. Major Takeshi Yamada, 23 kills, age 32, was dead before he knew he'd been hit. Intercom exploded with voices. "Holy, did you see that? Captain just shot down a 0 from the front." But no time to celebrate. 16 more fighters already adjusting attacks, coming from new angles, angrier now, more cautious. Game had changed, and killing had just begun. They came in waves. Second group of 0s swung wide, attacking from sides where they thought bomber would be weak. They were wrong. Brennan and Merrick opened fire from waist positions with twin-mounted .5s, pouring tracers into sky. 1-0, trying to make high side pass, flew directly into stream of fire. Brennan's rounds soared through wing root. Wing folded, snapped, and fighter began to spin. No parachute emerged. Pilot rode dying plane all way to ocean. Kill number 2. Dalton, in nose, swung flexible gun to track 0, making low frontal pass. Japanese pilot was good, jinking and weaving, making himself hard target. But Dalton was better, led the target, anticipated movement, squeezed off long burst. 0's canopy shattered. Fighter pulled up sharply, rolled inverted, dove straight down. Dead pilot, dead plane, kill number 3. "Keep cameras running," Thorne shouted over intercom. Mission wasn't over. Still needed photographs. Zeros regrouped, circling like sharks. 14 of them now. They'd lost 3 planes in first 2 minutes of combat. This wasn't going according to plan. Young Japanese lieutenant named Hiroshi Nakamura keyed radio. "They have heavy guns, more than normal. We need to attack from multiple angles simultaneously." Other pilots acknowledged, split into 3 groups, would come from different vectors, overwhelm defensive fire. At least that was plan. Thorne saw them setting up. Mind calculated angles, speeds, distances. He'd been doing this kind of math his entire life. Most of it unconscious now, instinct honed by thousands of hours in air. "Multiple contacts," he announced. 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 6 o'clock. They're coordinating. "We can't shoot in 3 directions at once," Cross said. "No, but we can make them think twice." 3 Zeros dove from right. Merrick swung gun, fired long burst. Didn't hit anything but forced them to break off approach. 3 more came from left. Brennan did same. Fighters veered away, but 3 attacking from behind pressed home. They knew tail gun was weakest position. Just 1 gunner against 3 fighters. They didn't know about Elijah Kincaid. Preacher from Georgia tracked lead 0 with mechanical precision. Was calm, focused, hands on gun steady as they'd been on Bible that morning. Waited until 0 was at 300 yards, then 200, then fired. Burst was short, controlled, every round on target. 0's prop stopped turning. Engine froze. Fighter fell away, trailing smoke. Second 0, seeing leader go down, broke left. Kincaid tracked smoothly, fired another burst. Hits on wing. 0 kept flying but pulled away, damaged. Third fighter pressed attack. Brave or stupid or both. His cannon rounds hammered tail section, punching holes, tearing metal. Kincaid felt impact through feet, felt plane shudder, aimed carefully, fired. 0's fuel tank exploded. Kill number 4, kill number 5, counting damaged one that limped away. 5 fighters down, 12 remaining, but cost was starting to show. Bomber was taking damage, tail section torn up. Right wing had 3 holes, size of dinner plates. Hydraulic fluid leaked from severed line, leaving mist in air. And they still had 15 minutes of photo run left. 15 minutes, 900 seconds, eternity. 0's now down to 12, pulled back to regroup, circled at distance, wary now, respectful. This bomber was not easy prey they'd expected. Inside aircraft, crew checked ammunition, called out damage. "Number 3 engine running hot," Thorne noted. "Keep an eye on it." "Photos at 60% complete," Dalton reported. "Need 10 more minutes." 10 minutes. Could they last that long? They'd find out. Japanese fighters were forming up again. This time weren't being cautious. This time angry. They came in fast and low, all 12 at once from every angle. Coordinated assault designed to overwhelm. Sky filled with tracer fire. Red and green lines crossed blue like deadly web. Sound was overwhelming. Engines screaming, guns hammering, shells exploding against aluminum. 20mm round detonated in nose. Explosion was deafening. Shrapnel flew like horizontal rain. Dalton was thrown backward, hit bulkhead hard, slid down, leaving smear of red on metal. "Dalton!" Thorne's voice was raw. No answer. Thorne couldn't turn around, couldn't look, had to fly. Had to keep plane steady for cameras, had to fight. Another 0 came at him head-on. Thorne lined up nose gun. Fired. Missed. 0's cannon rounds walked up fuselage, punching holes, destroying systems. But they didn't destroy plane. And they didn't destroy crew. Brennan, shoulder bleeding from shrapnel, kept firing. Merrick, half-deaf from near-miss explosion, kept firing. Kincaid, praying between bursts, kept firing. They were magnificent. They were terrifying. They were men who'd decided they would rather die fighting than die running. And 0's were learning terrible lesson. Wounded animal is most dangerous kind. 15 minutes became 10. 10 became 5. Bomber was a wreck. Number 3 engine was on fire. Cross had shut it down, pulled extinguisher, but smoke still poured from cowling. Oxygen system was destroyed. At 25,000 feet, crew was slowly suffocating. Thorne could feel it. Edges of vision going grey, thoughts getting fuzzy. Hypoxia. Silent killer. "We have to descend," Cross said. "Not yet. Photos almost done." "Captain, we're going to pass out." 2 more minutes." Behind him, Dalton stirred. He'd been unconscious for 10 minutes. Now, somehow, impossibly, was moving, pulling himself up. Blood-soaked flight suit, face grey. "Dalton, stay down," Thorne ordered. "Camera." Dalton's voice was weak. "Need to verify. Forget cameras. You're hurt bad." "Not dead yet." Dalton dragged himself to station, checked equipment with shaking hands. "Photos, complete. You can turn now." Relief flooded through Thorne. "All crew, we're breaking off. Hold on." He pushed yoke forward. Bomber dove, trading altitude for airspeed. Needed to get below 15,000 feet where air was thick enough to breathe. Remaining Zeros followed, diving after them, but they were low on fuel, low on ammunition, and they'd lost 5 of their number to single bomber. One by one, they peeled away. Heading back to base. Defeated. Hiroshi Nakamura, now senior surviving pilot, looked back at battered American bomber as it disappeared into clouds below. Never seen anything like it. 1 plane, 1 crew, against 17 fighters, and they'd survived, more than survived, they'd won. In bomber, silence fell, guns were quiet, engines droned, only sound was wind howling through 100 holes in fuselage. Thorne leveled off at 10,000 feet. Air was thick here, breathable. He sucked it in, felt head clear. "Damage report," he called. Responses came back slowly, everyone wounded, but everyone alive. Thorne looked back at Dalton. Bombardier was slumped against bulkhead, eyes closed, breathing, shallow, labored, but breathing. "Isaac," Thorne said, "stay with me. 400 miles to home. You just need to hold on." Dalton's eyes flickered open, tried to smile. "Did we make it count?" "Yes. You made it count. Now rest. Save your strength. I'm getting you home." Dalton nodded weakly, eyes closed again. And Garrett Thorne, who had just fought impossible battle and won, turned bomber toward Port Moresby and began long flight home. 400 miles, with dying plane and wounded crew and darkness coming on. But they were alive, and they were going home. The silence that followed the guns was absolute. It pressed down on the cockpit like physical weight, filling the space where violence had been. After 40 minutes of engines screaming and cannons hammering and metal tearing, the sudden absence of sound felt wrong, unnatural, like the world had stopped breathing. Thorne sat at the controls, hands locked on the yoke, and felt the bomber shudder beneath him. The airframe groaned. Metal flexed. Somewhere in the tail section, something gave way with a sharp crack. A piece of torn aluminum peeled free and tumbled away into the slipstream. They were still flying, barely. 3 engines instead of 4. The number 3 was dead, its cowling blackened from fire, its propeller feathered to stop the drag. The right wing had 3 holes the size of dinner plates punched through it by Japanese cannon shells. The tail section looked like lace, and through the shattered nose glass, wind howled into the cockpit with the sound of a dying animal. Behind Thorne, in the bombardier's station, Isaac Dalton lay against the bulkhead. Blood soaked his flight suit. His face was the color of old paper, but his chest still moved, shallow, irregular, but moving, still breathing, still alive. Thorne checked his instruments. Altitude 10,000 feet, airspeed 160 indicated, fuel enough for maybe 400 miles. Port Moresby was 400 miles away. The math was cruel and exact. They had just enough fuel to make it home. If nothing else went wrong, if the remaining engines held, if the airframe didn't come apart, if... "Captain," Cross's voice on the intercom, tight with pain. The navigator had taken shrapnel to the shoulder, but was still at his station, still working. "Go ahead." "We have a problem. The Owen Stanley Range is between us and Port Moresby. We need to cross it." Thorne knew. The mountains rose 13,000 feet at the passes, maybe higher, and with 3 engines and a shot-up airframe, they couldn't climb that high. "What are our options?" "We go around. South, down the coast. Adds 100 miles. Thorne looked at the fuel gauge again. They didn't have 100 extra miles. "Or?" he asked. "There's a pass, lower than the others, between Mount Victoria and Mount Albert. 11,000 feet at the saddle. It's narrow, very narrow, but it's our only shot." 11,000 feet. They were at 10 now. Could they climb another 1,000 with the damage they'd taken? They'd find out. "Set the course," Thorne said. We're going through." He pushed the throttles forward. The 3 remaining engines responded, their pitch rising, clawing for altitude. The bomber began to climb. Each foot of altitude came hard, bought with fuel and strain and the grinding protest of overstressed metal. Behind him, someone was checking on Dalton. Brennan's voice, low and urgent. "He's still breathing. Barely. We need to get him to a hospital." 400 miles, Thorne said. His voice was flat, factual. "That's how long he needs to hold on."
Geese, 400 miles, with a shattered stomach wound, with blood loss that had already turned his skin grey. It was impossible, but then so was everything else they'd done today. Thorne flew. The mountains appeared ahead like a wall of green stone. The Owen Stanley Range, jagged volcanic peaks wrapped in jungle and cloud. It had killed more pilots than the Japanese had. The updrafts were violent, the downdrafts worse. Men flew into cliffs they never saw coming, their planes disintegrating against rock at 200 miles per hour. But Thorne had flown this pass before, back when he had 4 engines and an intact airframe, back when the man behind him wasn't dying. The altimeter read 10,800 feet. Close, not close enough. "Come on," Thorne muttered. His hands ached from gripping the controls. His shattered left knee was a ball of white fire that pulsed with every heartbeat. He'd stopped looking at it. Looking at it made it real, and if it was real, he'd have to acknowledge that he was flying on a broken leg with a body that had lost too much blood. So he didn't look. He flew. 11,000 feet. The pass opened ahead of them. A notch in the green wall. Narrow. So narrow, the B-17's wingspan was 103 feet. The gap between the cliff faces looked maybe twice that, maybe less. "We're not going to fit," Kincaid said from the tail. His voice was calm. The voice of a man who'd already made his peace with God. "Yes, we are," Thorne said. He lined up on the center of the pass. The stall warning began to buzz. They were flying too slow, right on the edge of the wing, losing lift. But if he went faster, he'd burn fuel they didn't have, and if he climbed higher, the engines would quit in the thin air. So he flew the edge, the knife's edge between flying and falling. Grey clouds swallowed them. Visibility dropped to nothing. Thorne was flying blind now, trusting his instruments, trusting Cross's navigation, trusting that the pass was where it was supposed to be. Rock appeared out of the mist, close. 20 feet from the wingtip, a cliff face covered in moss and vines. Passing so close Thorne could see individual leaves. He corrected. The bomber wallowed through the turn like a drunk trying to walk a straight line. More rock. This time on the left. The canyon was closing in. The walls rose on both sides now. Green stone wet with cloud. The bomber filled the pass completely, wings nearly brushing the cliffs. Thorne could feel it in the controls, the way the air compressed, the way the wind tried to push them into the walls. He held the center. Steady. No sudden movements. The control cables were frayed. One wrong input and they'd snap. The pass narrowed further. 15 feet from stone on each side. 10 feet, then they were through. The mountains fell away. Ahead, through breaks in cloud, Thorne could see the coastal plain, the ocean, the airfield, home. Jesus Christ, Merrick whispered. No one else spoke. There were no words for what they'd just done. Thorne let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding, checked the fuel, barely enough, checked the engines, running hot but running, checked on Dalton. "How is he?" Brennan's voice came back, quiet. "Still breathing, but Captain, it's bad, real bad." "How long to Port Moresby?" 40 minutes, maybe less if we push it." 40 minutes. Could Dalton last that long? "Talk to him," Thorne said. Keep him awake. Don't let him slip away." "Yes, sir." Thorne pushed the throttles forward. The engines protested. The temperature gauges climbed into the red. But they held. Port Moresby was 60 miles away now, visible on the horizon. So close. 40 minutes. "Hold on, Isaac, just hold on." Thorne's vision was failing. It had started 10 minutes ago. A greyness at the edges that spread slowly inward, like water staining paper. He knew what it meant. Blood loss, his body shutting down. The shattered knee had been bleeding since Bougainville, slow but steady. And now there wasn't enough blood left to keep his brain working. He blinked hard, shook his head, tried to focus. The instrument swam. He knew what they said: altitude, heading, airspeed, but the knowledge felt distant, abstract, like he was watching someone else fly. "Captain, you okay?" Cross's voice, concerned. "Fine." He wasn't fine. The world tilted. The yoke went slack in his hands. For a terrible second, he was falling, the bomber falling with him. Then Cross was there, grabbing the controls, pulling them level. "Captain!" Thorne snapped back, grabbed the yoke. "I've got it." "Like hell you do, you just passed out." "I didn't." But he had, for a second, maybe two, long enough for the nose to drop. "Let me take the controls," Cross said. "No." Thorne's hands tightened on the yoke. "The cables are shot, the hydraulics are gone. One wrong move and they'll snap. I know this plane. I know exactly how much pressure it can take." "Then what do we do? You can't fly unconscious." Thorne looked down at his leg. The tourniquet he'd improvised from a torn jacket was soaked through. He reached down with his right hand, tightened it another notch. The pain was bright and sharp, and pushed the grey back for a moment. "If I start to black out again," Thorne said, "you slap me, hard, keep me awake." "Captain, that's an order." It wasn't a plan, but it was all they had. Port Moresby was 20 miles away now, close enough to see individual buildings, the control tower, the rows of tents. 20 miles. Thorne had flown thousands of miles in his life, across oceans, through storms, into combat. But these last 20 miles felt longer than all the others combined. He flew. And when the greyness came back, when his vision started to tunnel, Cross reached over and slapped him across the face. The pain brought clarity. For a moment, then the cycle began again. The radio was dead. Thorne discovered this when he tried to call the tower. He keyed the mic. Nothing. Static. Then silence. "Merrick, radio status?" A pause, then, "Destroyed, sir, took a direct hit. We can't transmit." Which meant the tower didn't know they were coming, didn't know to clear the runway, didn't know to have the ambulances ready. Thorne looked at the flare gun mounted beside his seat. Checked it. One flare. Red. The emergency signal. He cranked open the side window. Wind roared into the cockpit, a hurricane blast. His hands were shaking as he aimed the flare gun up and away from the aircraft. He pulled the trigger. The flare arced into the sky, trailing smoke. Bright red against the afternoon blue, it hung there for 3 seconds, screaming its silent message, emergency, wounded, coming in hot. Then it fell. On the ground, men looked up, saw the flare, saw the bomber behind it, trailing smoke, its nose blown away, its skin riddled with holes. In the control tower, an officer grabbed binoculars, tried to count the damage, stopped at 80 holes. There were too many. Fire trucks began to roll toward the runway. Ambulances followed. And Garrett Thorne, half-conscious, flying on instinct and stubborn will, lined up for his final approach. Gear down! Thorne pulled the lever. Nothing happened. He pulled again. The mechanism was frozen. The hydraulic system that powered the landing gear had been shot away over Bougainville. No hydraulics meant the wheels were locked up, which meant they were about to land on the belly. Unless... Cross. There's a manual backup. Red handle in the floor, aft of your station. Find it. The footsteps. The sound of someone moving through the damaged aircraft, stepping over shell casings and broken equipment. Found it. Crank it clockwise, fast as you can. The crank was designed for 2 men. Cross was alone, wounded, exhausted. But he cranked. Thorne counted seconds, 300 feet altitude. 200. They needed wheels now. Come on, he whispered. A metallic thunk. A groan of stressed metal. The gear indicator flickered. Then, green, the wheels were down. Stop, Thorne ordered. Cross collapsed, gasping. 100 feet. No hydraulics also meant no brakes. No flaps to slow them down. They'd be landing fast, too fast, and once they touched concrete, they wouldn't be able to stop. Thorne lined up on the center line of the runway. His hands were steady despite everything. This was what he was good at. This was what all those sleepless nights had trained him for. 50 feet. He cut the throttles. The engines went quiet. The bomber dropped. 20 feet. The runway rushed up. Impact. The wheels hit hard. The bomber bounced. High. 10 feet back into the air. Metal screamed. Rivets popped like gunfire. In the back, something structural gave way with a sound like a tree breaking. They came down again. Stayed down this time. But they were going too fast. 90 miles per hour. 80. The runway was a grey blur beneath them. Thorne pressed on the brakes. Nothing. He pressed harder. Still nothing. Just dead pedals. And a plane that wouldn't slow. Halfway down the runway, and not slowing. He used the rudder, trying to keep them straight. His broken knee screamed. He screamed with it. But he kept pressure on the pedal, kept the nose pointed down the center line. 3/4 of the runway gone. Ahead, the end of the concrete. Then dirt. Then trees. Brace! Thorne shouted into the intercom. They ran out of runway. The bomber hit the dirt at 60 miles per hour. The wheels dug in. The nose pitched forward. For one terrible moment, Thorne thought they would flip, cartwheel, explode. But the tail stayed down. The plane stayed upright. It plowed through red earth, the propellers chewing dirt, the engines howling. 50 miles per hour, 40, 30. The trees were right there. 20, 10. The bomber lurched to a final stop 15 feet from the jungle. The engines died. The propellers went still, and in the sudden silence, Thorne heard someone crying, someone else laughing, Kincaid praying in a rushed, grateful torrent. Thorne tried to unbuckle. His hands wouldn't work. Everything felt distant, cold. The greyness was spreading again, faster this time, consuming his vision, his thoughts, his awareness. Outside, he heard shouting, running footsteps, sirens. The last thing he saw before the darkness took him was the sky through the shattered windscreen. Clear and blue and perfect, they came for Dalton first. The medics climbed through the torn nose of the aircraft, their boots crunching on spent brass and broken glass. They found him slumped against the bulkhead, his flight suit dark with blood, his breathing shallow and wet. But breathing. "He's alive!" someone shouted. They worked fast, cut away his jacket, applied pressure to the wound, started an IV. His pulse was there, weak, thready, but there. "Get a stretcher, now!" They lifted him out carefully, gently, as if he might break. His eyes flickered open for a moment, unfocused, confused. "You're home," one of the medics said. "Port Moresby. You made it." Dalton's lips moved. No sound came out. Then his eyes closed again. They loaded him into an ambulance. Doors slammed. The vehicle raced away toward the field hospital, siren wailing. Then they went back for Thorne. He was unconscious in the pilot's seat, slumped over the yoke. His left leg was destroyed below the knee. His flight suit was soaked with blood from the waist down. They couldn't find a pulse at first. Then, finally, there it was, faint, irregular. But there. "He shouldn't be alive," one medic said. "Neither should the plane," another replied, looking around at the shredded cockpit, the hundreds of holes, the blood everywhere. "But here we are." They pulled Thorne out, loaded him onto a stretcher. As they carried him toward the second ambulance, he stirred. His eyes opened, unfocused.
"Dalton," he whispered. "Is he—" "Your bombardier is alive, Captain. He's already on his way to the hospital. The photos—" "Worry about the photos later. Right now, you need to stay with us." But Thorne's eyes were already closing. The medic felt for a pulse. Still there. Barely. The ambulance doors closed. It raced away, following the path the first one had taken. Behind them, the ground crew approached the bomber. They stood in silence, staring at the wreckage. Counting holes, stopped at 100, then at 150. The final count was 187 bullet holes and 5 large cannon shell impacts. "It shouldn't have flown," a mechanic said. "But it did," his chief replied. "And they made it home." He placed a hand on the torn fuselage, almost reverently. In the distance, sirens faded. The base began to settle back into its routine. But word was already spreading. The bomber that flew alone into 17 fighters, the crew that shouldn't have survived, the pilot who brought them home on a broken leg and empty fuel tanks. The story was just beginning. Field hospital, surgical tent, 3 hours later. The surgeons worked on Isaac Dalton for 4 hours. They removed shrapnel from his stomach, his liver, his intestines. They repaired torn blood vessels. They transfused blood. 6 units, then 8, then 10. More than one person's worth. They were replacing his entire blood volume piece by piece. The lead surgeon, Major Alan Sheffield, had been operating in field hospitals since North Africa. He'd seen everything: gut wounds, head trauma, men who should have died but didn't, men who should have lived but couldn't. He'd learned not to make predictions, but privately, standing in the scrub room after the surgery, washing blood from his hands, he thought, "This one won't make it through the night. Too much damage. Too much blood loss. The human body could only take so much." He wrote his notes, ordered morphine for pain, told the nurses to keep him comfortable. Then he went to work on the pilot. Garrett Thorne's left knee was shattered. The patella was in pieces. The bullet had fragmented on impact, sending metal and bone through the joint.
The damage was severe. Permanent. Sheffield cleaned the wound, removed the fragments he could reach, set the bone as best he could, splinted the leg. "Will he walk?" a nurse asked. Sheffield didn't answer immediately. He sutured the wound closed, his stitches neat and precise. "He'll live, whether he'll walk normally again." He shrugged. "Ask me in 6 months." Thorne stayed unconscious through the surgery. The anesthesia wasn't necessary. He was already deep under from blood loss and shock. But they gave it to him anyway. When Sheffield was done, he stood back and looked at both patients, the pilot and the bombardier. Both in critical condition, both hanging on by threads. "Extraordinary men," he said quietly. "Sir?" the nurse asked. "Nothing, just keep close watch on both of them tonight. If either one takes a turn, call me immediately." He left. The nurse stayed, moving between the two beds, checking pulses, adjusting IVs, watching, waiting. Day 1, 0400 hours, Isaac Dalton opened his eyes. The morphine made everything soft around the edges. The pain was there but distant, like something happening to someone else. He could see the canvas ceiling of the hospital tent, could hear rain on the roof, smell antiseptic and blood. Where was he? Memory came back in pieces. The mission, the fight, the cannon shell, pain. Then nothing. He tried to sit up, couldn't. His body wouldn't respond. He looked down and saw bandages, tubes. His stomach was wrapped in white. A nurse appeared at his bedside. Young, tired, kind eyes. "Easy, Lieutenant, you're in the field hospital. Port Moresby, you've been in surgery."
Port Moresby, they'd made it. "Captain Thorne!" Dalton's voice was a rasp. "Where?" "He's here, 2 beds over, unconscious but alive." Dalton turned his head. Through the dim light he could see another bed, a figure wrapped in bandages, still. 2, still. "Is he? Will he? The doctor thinks he'll survive. His leg is badly damaged, but he'll live." Dalton closed his eyes. Relief flooded through him. They'd made it. Both of them. "The photos," he said. Did the cameras,
The nurse smiled. "Perfect, I'm told. Every single frame. You did it." They did it. Dalton felt something wet on his cheeks. He wasn't sure if it was tears or rain leaking through the tent. Didn't matter. They'd flown into impossible odds. They'd survived. They'd completed the mission. "Thank you," he whispered. The nurse adjusted his IV. "Rest now. You need to heal." But Dalton couldn't rest. Not yet. There was something he needed to know. "How bad am I?" The nurse's smile faltered, just for a second, but Dalton saw it. "The surgery went well. You've lost a lot of blood, but you're stable." "That's not what I asked." She was quiet for a moment, then, "The damage is extensive, internal. The doctors did everything they could, which meant it was bad, maybe too bad." Dalton nodded slowly. He'd known, really, had known from the moment the shell hit. The pain had been too much, the blood loss too severe. "How long?" he asked. "I don't know, Lieutenant. No one does."
"You've surprised us by making it this far. Hours? Days? I don't know." Dalton looked over at Thorne's bed again. His captain, his friend, the man who'd brought him home. "When he wakes up," Dalton said, tell him I'm proud to have flown with him." "You can tell him yourself?" "Maybe, but in case I can't." The nurse nodded, squeezed his hand. "I'll tell him." Dalton closed his eyes. The morphine was pulling him under again, soft, warm, like falling into deep water.
The last thing he thought before the darkness took him. We made it count. Day 2, 0830 hours, Garrett Thorne woke to white, White ceiling, white walls, white sheets. The smell of antiseptic. The sound of rain. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. Didn't remember, then it came back. The mission. The fight. Dalton bleeding. The landing. Dalton. Thorne tried to sit up. Pain exploded through his left leg, a white-hot spike that made him gasp and fall back. Easy. A nurse appeared at his bedside, the same one who'd been with Dalton. You're at the field hospital. You've been unconscious for 2 days. 2 days. My crew, Thorne's voice was rough. Where? Most of them are fine. Brennan has a shoulder wound, but he's recovering. Kincaid, Cross, and Merrick are bruised, but walking. They've been asking about you. And Dalton? The nurse's expression changed, softened in a way that made Thorne's stomach drop. Lieutenant Dalton made it through the first night. The surgeons did everything they could, but the damage was too severe. Internal bleeding, shrapnel in places they couldn't reach. She paused. He died this morning, around 0600. The words didn't make sense at first. Thorne heard them, understood them, but they felt abstract, unreal. He was conscious yesterday, the nurse continued quietly. For about 10 minutes, he asked about you, asked if you'd made it home. What did you tell him? I told him you were sleeping, that you were safe, that the mission was a success. Her eyes were wet. He smiled, said, "Good, we made it count." And then he went back to sleep. He didn't wake up again. Thorne stared at the white ceiling, felt something cold settle in his chest. Heavy. Final. Dalton had been alive. Had been right here. 2 beds over, had asked about him. And Thorne had been unconscious. Hadn't been there. I should have been awake, he said.
Captain, you'd lost half your blood. Your body shut down. There was nothing. Oh, I should have been awake. Thorne's voice was flat, dead. He died, and I wasn't there. The nurse started to say something else, stopped, squeezed his hand instead. After she left, Thorne lay in the hospital bed and stared at the ceiling and tried to feel something. Grief, anger, relief that he'd survived. But all he felt was empty. Isaac Dalton, 29 years old, best bombardier in the Pacific.
The man who'd volunteered to fly a cursed plane with a pilot no one else wanted. The man who'd taken a cannon shell meant for Thorne. The man who'd held on just long enough to know they'd made it home. Gone. Thorne closed his eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. It never did. 6 days later, Colonel Harlan Voss came to the hospital on a humid afternoon when the rain had finally stopped. He stood at the foot of Thorne's bed, his uniform crisp despite the heat, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, he just looked at Thorne. Then he spoke. "I owe you an apology." Thorne said nothing. He was in a wheelchair now. The doctors had gotten him mobile, but walking was still weeks away, maybe months. "I called you reckless," Voss continued. "Dangerous, a liability. I grounded you because I thought you couldn't be trusted." He paused. "I was wrong." "Dalton's dead," Thorne said quietly. "I know, and I'm sorry for that, truly." Voss's voice softened. "But what you did over Bougainville, 1 bomber against 17 fighters, and you won. You brought your crew home. You completed an impossible mission." He shook his head. "That's the bravest thing I've seen in 30 years of service." Thorne looked away, out the window, where mechanics were working on aircraft, where the war continued without him. "The photographs are perfect," Voss said. "General Ashford says they're exactly what we need." When we invade Bougainville, and we will soon, those pictures will save thousands of lives, thousands of Marines who won't walk into hidden guns because you mapped every inch of that coastline. Thorne's jaw tightened. Dalton took those pictures. I know, and he'll be honored for it. Voss pulled a folder from under his arm, set it on the bed. Both of you will. You've been nominated for the Medal of Honor. You and Lieutenant Dalton. The paperwork is already approved. The Medal of Honor. The highest decoration the country could give. Thorne didn't open the folder. There's something else. Voss reached into his jacket, pulled out a piece of paper. Thorne recognized it immediately. The grounding order, 6 months old now, creased from being carried and stamped across the top in red ink, grounded. Voss held it up so Thorne could see it clearly. Then deliberately he tore it in half. Your grounding is lifted, effective immediately. Voss tore it again, into quarters. When you recover, and the doctors say you will walk again eventually, you can have any assignment you want, any plane, any crew. You've earned it, Captain. You've earned everything. What Thorne had wanted for 6 months. What he'd risked everything for. What he'd thought he'd never have again. He looked at Voss for a long moment, at the torn pieces of paper in the colonel's hands, at the freedom being offered. Then he said, "No." Voss blinked. Voss.
Excuse me? I don't want another assignment. I don't want another crew. Captain, you just proved you're the best combat pilot in the Pacific Theater. Dalton was the best bombardier in the Pacific. And he's dead because I took him into a fight we had no business surviving. Thorne's voice was quiet, final. I won't fly combat again. Thorne, not without him. Not without the one man who trusted me when no one else would. The one man who volunteered to fly a cursed plane with a pilot, everyone said, was too dangerous. Thorne looked directly at Voss. You were right about me, Colonel. I am reckless. I am dangerous. And Isaac Dalton died because of it. That's not true. He died a hero. He died. Thorne's voice cut through. That's all that matters, and I won't take another crew into that kind of danger. I won't be responsible for another Isaac Dalton. Voss stood there, the torn, grounding order still in his hands. What will you do? Train pilots. Teach them what Dalton taught me. That courage isn't the absence of fear. That sometimes you fly anyway. That a good crew can overcome impossible odds. Thorne's voice softened. I'll make sure his lessons live on. But I won't fly combat. Not again. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Voss nodded slowly. If that's your decision. It is. Sir, you can write up new orders. Put me wherever you need instructors, but I'm grounding myself permanently. Voss looked at the torn paper in his hands, then at Thorne. You're a damn fool, Captain. Yes, sir. And one hell of a pilot. Was, sir, was. Voss dropped the torn grounding order on the bed. The pieces scattered across the white sheets like confetti, or ash. For what it's worth, Voss said quietly, I think Dalton would be proud of you. Then he left. Thorne sat alone in his wheelchair, looking at the torn paper. The official order that had defined him for 6 months. The thing he'd fought so hard to overcome. And now it was gone. Meaningless. Because the only person whose opinion had ever really mattered was dead. November 1943. Medal of Honor ceremony. The morning was clear and bright. Rows of soldiers in dress uniform filled the parade ground. Officers with chests full of medals stood at attention. A photographer from Stars and Stripes set up his camera. A small band played quietly in the background. And Garrett Thorne, in a wheelchair, his shattered leg in a cast, sat on a temporary stage and tried not to feel anything. He'd fought the wheelchair, had spent 6 months learning to walk again with a cane,
pushing through rehabilitation that made grown men weep. But the doctors had insisted, for today, for the ceremony, for appearances, the Medal of Honor was serious business. General Ashford stepped to the podium, read from a prepared citation. The words were formal, bloodless. Conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of life above and beyond the call of duty. It didn't capture the reality, the fear, the violence. The moment when the cannon shell hit and Dalton's blood painted the nose glass red. But words never could. Ashford called Thorne forward. 2 soldiers helped him stand, supporting him under the arms. He stood on his good leg, the broken one held off the ground. Ashford placed the medal around Thorne's neck. The ribbon was blue, the medal was a 5-pointed star, heavy and cold against his chest. "Your nation is grateful for your sacrifice and your courage," Ashford said. Thorne nodded, couldn't speak. His throat was too tight. Then Ashford called forward Isaac Dalton's parents. They came slowly. Mr. Dalton was a farmer from Iowa, his hands rough with work, his suit ill-fitting. Mrs. Dalton was small, quiet, with eyes that had cried all their tears weeks ago, and now held only a dry, terrible grief. Ashford presented them with their son's Medal of Honor. Mrs. Dalton took it with trembling hands, held it like it was made of glass, like it might break. "Your son died a hero," Ashford said. His voice was gentle. "He gave his life in service to his country. His sacrifice will save thousands of lives when we invade Bougainville," she nodded. But her eyes said what her mouth wouldn't. "I don't want a medal. I want my son." The ceremony ended. The soldiers dispersed. The photographer packed up his camera, and the Daltons approached Thorne. He tried to stand from the wheelchair, couldn't, stayed seated. It felt wrong, disrespectful. "Captain Thorne?" Mr. Dalton's voice was rough, Midwestern, honest. "Thank you for bringing our son home." The words were a knife. "I'm sorry I couldn't bring him home alive." "You did what you could."
"Isaac!" Mr. Dalton's voice broke. He cleared his throat, tried again. "Isaac wrote to us about you. In his letters, he said you were the best pilot he'd ever known. Said if he had to fly into danger, he wanted it to be with you. He trusted you." Something broke in Thorne's chest. He'd held it together through the ceremony, through the speeches and the salutes and the formal words. But this simple honesty from people who had every right to hate him, this was too much.
"He saved my life," Thorne said. His voice was thick. "When that cannon shell hit, he pushed me aside. Took the hit meant for me. He didn't have to do that." "That sounds like Isaac." Mrs. Dalton touched Thorne's hand. Her fingers were cold. "He always looked out for others, even as a boy." She pulled something from her purse. A photograph. Black and white, creased at the corners. It showed a young man in uniform, smiling. Isaac Dalton, younger than Thorne had known him, happier. "I want you to have this," she said, "so you remember him, not just how he died, but who he was." Thorne took the photo with shaking hands, looked at Dalton's smile, the confidence in his eyes, the man he'd been before Bougainville. "Thank you," Thorne whispered. They left soon after, taking their grief with them, taking the memory of their son. And Thorne sat in his wheelchair, holding the photograph, and felt the full weight of survival settle on his shoulders. Why did I live? Why him and not me? The questions had no answers. They never would. But he would carry them for the rest of his life. August 1945. The war ends. Japan surrendered on a Tuesday. The news spread through Port Moresby like wildfire. Men cheered. Bottles appeared from hidden caches. Someone fired a gun into the air until an officer told him to stop wasting ammunition. The war was over. Garrett Thorne, now 42 years old, heard the news while teaching a class on formation flying. He dismissed the students early. Let them celebrate. He walked with a cane, with a permanent limp, but he walked to the boneyard. Most of the wrecks were gone now, sold for scrap, hauled away. The war was ending and the military didn't need graveyards of broken planes anymore. But one piece remained. The nose section of B-17 serial number 41-2666. Someone had saved it before the rest was destroyed, cut it free and left it in the weeds at the far edge of the field. Thorne approached slowly. His leg still hurt. It would always hurt, but he'd learned to live with it. The nose glass was long gone. The interior was stripped. But he could still see where the bombardier's position had been, where Isaac had sat, where he'd died. Thorne reached into his pocket, pulled out the Medal of Honor. He'd carried it every day since the ceremony, couldn't bring himself to display it. It felt wrong to celebrate something that had cost so much. He placed the medal in the empty bombardier's station. The metal clinked softly against metal. 5 confirmed kills, Isaac, he said quietly, against 17 fighters. They said it was impossible. But we did it. The wind moved through the wreckage. A hollow sound. I trained 247 pilots after I stopped flying combat. 52 of them became aces. 52 men who learned to fight because I taught them what you taught me. Thorne's voice was steady. That courage isn't the absence of fear. It's flying anyway. It's pushing the throttle forward when every instinct says to turn back. It's trusting your crew even when the odds say you're all going to die. He touched the torn metal where the cannon shell had hit. The metal was rough, oxidized, already being reclaimed by rust and time. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry you died and I didn't. I'm sorry for all of it. The sun was setting. Long shadows stretched across the boneyard. Thorne pulled the photograph from his wallet, the one Mrs. Dalton had given him. Isaac's smile, frozen in silver and paper. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he placed it in the cockpit beside the medal. Rest well, my friend. Your work is done. And you did it better than anyone else could have. He turned away. He turned, walked slowly across the field, his cane tapping a rhythm on the packed earth. Behind him, the nose of 666 sat alone in the fading light. A monument. A memory. A reminder of the day when impossible became possible because 2 men refused to accept that odds mattered. Thorne didn't look back. Looking back hurt too much. Garrett Thorne lived to be 88 years old. He never flew combat again after that single mission over Bougainville on May 22nd, 1943. But he became one of the most respected flight instructors in the Army Air Forces and later the U.S. Air Force. Over the course of his career, he trained 247 pilots. 52 of them became aces, 43 flew in Korea, 27 in Vietnam. They called him the Old Man, with a mixture of fear and reverence. He was harder on them than any other instructor, demanded more, accepted no excuses. But every single one of them learned to fly with a skill and precision that kept them alive when others died. He married late, at age 50, to a librarian named Margaret, who had never asked him about the war and never complained when he woke up at 3 in the morning and went for long walks. They had 2 children, a son who became a commercial pilot, a daughter who became a surgeon. He told them about the war sometimes, but never about that day. That day was private, sacred. Between him and a ghost, He kept Isaac Dalton's photograph in his wallet until the day he died in 2007. The photograph was worn, faded, the corners soft from decades of being carried. But Dalton's smile was still visible, still bright, still young. When Thorne died, peacefully, in his sleep, at his home in Maine, his family found the Medal of Honor in his desk drawer, wrapped in tissue paper, never displayed. They found letters from hundreds of former students. They found logbooks and charts and a lifetime of accumulated memories. And they found, in a sealed envelope marked to be opened after my death, a single sheet of paper. A hand-written letter. To whoever reads this, I flew one combat mission in World War II, one mission, one crew, one plane. We were sent to die. We survived instead. I shot down 3 enemy fighters that day. My bombardier, Isaac Dalton, shot down 2 more. Our crew got another 2. Crew got total 7 confirmed kills against 17 attackers. It was called impossible. We did it anyway. But the numbers don't matter, the kills don't matter, the medals don't matter. What matters is this. Isaac Dalton was 29 years old. He had his whole life ahead of him. He could have refused the mission, could have let someone else volunteer, could have lived to be an old man like me, but he went because he trusted me. And he died because I took him into a fight that should have killed us both. I have carried that weight for 64 years. Every pilot I trained in his memory. Every lesson I taught because Isaac taught me first. Every life I saved through training was my attempt to balance the scales. It was never enough. If you're reading this, I'm gone now, finally at rest. But please remember this, heroes aren't the ones who survive. Heroes are the ones who give everything so others can come home. Isaac Dalton was a hero. I was just the man lucky enough to fly with him. Garrett Thorne, Captain, U.S. Army Air Forces, retired. The letter was buried with him. His funeral was attended by over 300 people, former students, their families, fellow veterans, strangers who'd heard the story and wanted to pay respects. At the cemetery, an Air Force honor guard fired a 21-gun salute. A bugler played taps. The flag that draped his coffin was folded with precision and presented to his widow. And in the back of the crowd, quietly, a delegation from the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum stood with a small metal plaque. 6 months later, they unveiled an exhibit. The Porcupine, B-17 serial number 41-2666. The exhibit included pieces of the bomber recovered from Port Moresby, a section of fuselage, part of the nose, a .50 caliber gun mount, and photographs. The aerial reconnaissance photos that Thorne and Dalton had died and lived to capture. The plaque read, on May the 22nd, 1943, Captain Garrett Thorne and Lieutenant Isaac Dalton flew a single B-17 bomber against 17 Japanese Zero fighters over Bougainville. Against impossible odds, they completed their reconnaissance mission, shooting down 5 confirmed enemy aircraft and damaging several others. The bomber sustained 187 bullet holes and 5 cannon shell impacts, but successfully returned to base. Lieutenant Dalton died of his wounds the following day. Captain Thorne survived but never flew combat again. Both men were awarded the Medal of Honor. Their photographs saved an estimated 2,000 lives during the invasion of Bougainville in November 1943. This exhibit honors their courage, their sacrifice, and the principle that sometimes impossible is just a word.
Every year, on May 22nd, someone leaves flowers at the exhibit. No one knows who, but the flowers are always fresh, and the story lives on.